All right, it is Friday. That is an 18. It looks a little funny there, but that is. So we're at Friday, and we're just finishing, if you can believe it or not, week 6. All right. So my first thing I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about next week. We're going to work a little bit on photography, and we are going to, with this example, iron and lace. Okay, we looked up information. Iron and lace photography in Davenport. So we're going to talk about software, hardware, a little bit about solution, and we'll take a look at the details. We can review the interview. I'll talk a little bit about that. We did a video conference with Maggie Reckemer, and we'll follow up with that on Monday. Also on Monday, we'll do some more spreadsheet work. I'm thinking maybe new groups, share the wealth of knowledge. And we're going to, on Monday, we'll take a look inside the machines. We also have software items to do on Monday. So quite a bit to do, but no one thing will be a big part of the class. You can look in the announcements in Canvas. I already have next week laid out what we'll be doing. Week after next, we've got to finish up the next unit and then skills-based test and midterm. Alright, so, and move forward here. So the first thing we did today, and let me mark this off a little bit. We talked about the motherboard. We talked about the processor, most important part of the motherboard. And then we also talked about memory, random access memory. And we talked about storage. Okay? And then we related this to the interview. We were going to, in the interview, ask what software Maggie uses at Iron and Lace. We're going to ask a little bit about the computers she uses. She uses Macintoshes. And what kind of storage needs that she would have. Okay? So, let's break this down a little more. So, we talked about the motherboard. Right? And it's the circuitry that moves everything through. And then the processor, RAM, typically plugs into the motherboard. And the storage can be inside the computer, but typically connects to the motherboard. And we're going to look at those on Monday. Crucial, right? Processor and memory. And we talked a little bit about it's really important to have plenty of memory, maybe more so than having a top-notch processor, unless you're doing like high-end gaming. Okay? So, when we interviewed Maggie, she talked about Adobe Lightroom and how she edits the raw files when she collects them. She takes pictures with her camera. The camera has 2 cards in it that she actually leaves in the device, and then she uses a cable and connects. Here, I can do a better job of that. And then she uses a cable, I have it right here, and she connects USB to her computer, and then her computer, her storage is actually an external drive, and so she copies all of her pictures on the external drive, and that also is connected using USB, so that's connected to the motherboard, and then she works with that. Okay? So, the hard drive. We didn't get the details of that hard drive, but I might talk to her this weekend and get some of that. Alright, we did talk about some of the details of the computers. Okay, so let me highlight that. She has an iMac, a little bit older, 2012, and this would be her desktop. It has 8 gigabits, or gigabytes, excuse me, it has 8 gigabytes of memory. So we're We're talking about this right here, random access memory. Her MacBook Pro is relatively new, and it has 6 gigabytes of memory. It seems to work, according to Maggie, pretty well with her software and her editing. Not so much the machine here. A little bit older, and we're going to talk about in class why that might exist. We'll look up the details on that computer. Her needs. So, talked about the external drive she's currently using and the issues. Uploading to the cloud has been an issue. And here's what she has. So let's highlight that. At her home, her devices connect via Wi-Fi to her routing equipment, so to speak, and she has a cable modem that connects to MediaCom in Davenport. The routing devices are all new. She went with Google, and so she has 3 of those in the house. They have very good connectivity in the house, so there's no problem there. Okay. She's supposed to have 20 million bits per second up, and she was saying she's been getting 85 million bits down for MediaCom. At times, she says a little inconsistent. All right. So, let's move on to the next page. She was using Crash Plan Pro to store her files out in the cloud. She decided to quit using that. The issue was the uploads were just taking too long. The key things she needs to do, she needs to be able to edit the folders both at home and remotely, and also be able to back them up. Okay? A lot of data. Typical shoot, session is 500 pictures at 25 to 50 megabytes per picture. Okay? She's keeping all of the files at this time. So that's per session. So I did a little bit of averaging 15 to 40 sessions a month. So she's guessing she would average 20 sessions a month. And in her type of pictures, time of year is a lot more. Like October is like 40. Everybody's getting Christmas pictures, fall pictures, and everything. Right now, in January, maybe 15 sessions. So she's currently using Shootproof. I think that's spelled right. And this, I'm not sure if she said $20 a month or not. This way the clients, they can download pictures, they can order prints, and this helps her manage her workflow. She gets in, it helps with invoicing. This is really important. Small businesses, you don't want to be spending lots of your time managing things that can be handled using technology. Make sense? They asked about budget. The students did. Actually, Chris did, and so she gave some vague numbers, and I don't blame her. 500 to 1,000. She wouldn't mind spending if they had a solution. We asked per month, and she made it sound like $50 a month was too much. But that shouldn't deter students from saying, well, there is some places where you can store lots of data in the cloud for a reasonable price if you're not getting a lot of extras with that. She said she rattled off a laundry list, and I can't remember everything between, her website, how much she spends on that a year, her iCloud storage, $3 a month, but then that adds up. She pays for her software to keep her books. She has Light, that software that she's using for editing, etc., etc. So she's in the situation where she needs to keep her costs down in order to be able to make her time worth her money, worth the money she's making. All right. So in the big picture, here's what we're trying to do. As students, we're trying to, I'm going to highlight some things here. We're trying to understand more about hardware and how that, and here, how that relates to a business. Okay, a camera would be hardware. Okay, how all that connects and relates to a business. We're talking about data. Let's do that in green. So we have these needs for data. Do we keep the data in the cloud? Do we keep it locally? Do we use some cloud services we already have for some of the data, etc.? So there's a whole issue of how you manage. Let me do this. How you manage the data, especially when you have large quantities. How do you back it up and so forth? In the future, we'll talk more about this connection into the internet and how we connect to other locations and how we run into issues with speed or performance in doing that. All right, so we're trying to, and we're going to talk more, okay, more about software. We'll talk more about software on Monday. Actually, going to more on that on Monday. Lightroom and how she does this, and we'll talk about software in general. We'll talk about more specifically about operating systems, utilities, and applications. Okay? And you can see your dilemma. Editing and backing it up. How's she going to do that? Alright, so looking ahead next week, we'll talk about software. In fact, I'm going to, let's do this. Talk about software, and I just mentioned a couple of directions we're going to go. System, and we'll talk about more details about system software, OS, and utilities. We'll look at some examples. We'll actually use a different OS, and we'll look at some utilities. We'll log into computers different. We'll talk about applications and how we divide applications up. Okay, and then we'll finish. We'll do a little more on spreadsheets. And then next week we start talking about multimedia, which will be interesting. Not a lot of material to learn, just a few key things. Well, that is it for another week. Hard to believe. We'll see everybody on Monday.